I froze, rooted to the spot by the glass wall, watching the scene unfold. Ethan Sterling and Owen Grady were huddled together, occupying my rightful place, the one where I usually conducted Monday morning briefings. I used to pore over a yellow legal pad, mapping out multi-million-dollar campaign strategies, while Ethan Sterling pretended to understand the meaning of CTR decay. But now Ethan Sterling was chuckling like a tipsy father at a roadside Chili's. Owen Grady, like a loyal golden retriever who'd just discovered the world, was nodding attentively, his eyes wide with admiration. I hadn't been invited to this meeting. I only found out about it thanks to a ghostly reminder in Outlook, a calendar I had created myself. For a full 10 seconds, I stood there, paralyzed, watching them, clutching dry erase markers and the last shred of my dignity. And then Owen Grady looked up. He saw me. And he gave me that signature smile of his, with the slight tilt of the head, as if to say, I'm just learning from the best. As if I hadn't taught him how to spot the flaws in our presentations, how to read the psychological profiles of our clients, how to survive in this dog-eat-dog world without being torn to shreds. That smile, like an icy blade, shattered something inside me. But no. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a chair at them. I spun around sharply, as if I'd been struck, and headed straight for the archive room. There, among the dusty servers, I found an old rack where the last copy of our 2019 AI Bringer launch funnel was stored. My funnel. The one that had landed us their flagship account. The one that was supposed to secure me equity in the company. The one I had slaved over, sacrificing sleep and comfort, turning the office sofa into a makeshift bed, bruising my ribs against the sharp edges of the drywall, while Ethan Sterling was off dreaming about visualizations in Sedona. And what did I find? An access log. Owen Grady had cloned it 2 days ago. And he'd labeled the new file as Legacy Reference Architecture. Legacy. A wave of nausea washed over me. Unable to contain my rage, I printed out the entire damn thing. Stapled the 300-page behemoth together. Then I went back to my desk. Owen Grady was standing there, hunched over my drawer, rummaging through it as if he'd lost a pen. The sight of him made my blood boil. I slammed the stack onto the desk with such force that the stapler flew apart. Owen jumped back in surprise, but quickly plastered on his smug grin. "Whoa, Harper, what's this legacy?" he drawled. I didn't dignify him with a response and simply walked out. Skipped the next call. Just got in my car and drove 2 stops east, across the river. Killing the engine, I looked around the underground parking garage. 6 years. It had been an eternity since I last set foot in this building. In the lobby, I was greeted by the familiar scent of pine cleaner mixed with the aura of overvalued contracts. Taking the elevator to the 18th floor, I walked straight into the reception area without delay. Harper, the secretary's eyes widened as if she'd seen a ghost. After all these years, I was back to talk to Vincent. The corner of her lip twitched almost imperceptibly. He'll like that. Passing through the frosted glass doors, I found myself in front of Vincent's office. The man who had tried to poach me twice now held the biggest contract Ethan Sterling had ever signed. Vincent jumped up when I appeared. No handshake. Just that signature, calculating smirk. "What made you change your mind?" he asked, his eyes never leaving mine. I didn't answer, but simply dropped the 300-page printout on his desk. He didn't even flinch. But I saw that predatory glint in his eyes, as if he'd been handed a map to Ethan Sterling's Achilles heel. "Tell me everything," Vincent growled, leaning forward. And I started to tell him. But not all at once. Not yet. First, Owen Grady needed to see what a real strategy looked like. The next morning, Owen Grady knocked on my door. He was holding a coffee, clearly paid for with someone else's money, and wearing an expression of puppy-dog hope, as if he thought he deserved some kind of reward. "Thought you could use a pick-me-up," he mumbled, placing the cup on my desk as if it were a sacrificial latte of gratitude. "Extra oat milk," echoed in my head. I glared at him, but he didn't seem to notice my tension. The smug bastard must have thought he was irresistible. A typical two-faced charmer who'd give you a fake compliment on your blazer while sending your resignation letter straight to HR. "You've been quiet lately," he said, drawing out the words, "Everything okay?" I forced a tight smile. Just watching the future unfold. That was enough to bring out his pleased smirk and make him speak with the tone of a man who was dying to brag about his triumph. "I had a great conversation with Ethan Sterling after your meeting got pushed back. He said I could take on more responsibility for the bringer account. You know, lighten your load." I barely stopped myself from laughing in his face. Lighten my load? He'd been dragging my career behind him like a trophy in his stupid, grade school Reeboks. While he was in Ethan Sterling's office, stroking his inflated ego and spouting buzzwords, he had no idea I was already halfway through closing a much more lucrative deal with Vincent. This contract wasn't just a way to jump off a sinking ship. It was about blowing the damn thing to smithereens. That evening, we met Vincent at a tucked-away bar in German Village, wedged between a used bookstore and a church that might as well have been selling incense by the pound. He planted his laptop on the table like a flag, and I countered with a flash drive labeled "Client Translation Materials." Before I even sat down, he was pouring amber whiskey into glasses. "We'll need irrefutable proof of content ownership," Vincent said, instantly diving into the files on the drive. "Preferably with clear timestamps." I smirked, already anticipating his reaction. "Open the For Owen Grady folder. You'll find everything you need there." And it was all there: layered design files, client presentations with untouched data, Slack printouts accurate to the second, each proving that I had built this client's strategy from the ground up. Vincent nodded slowly, his eyes burning with a sense of vindication, like he was savoring every moment of the impending reckoning. "If we play our cards right," he whispered, "we won't just poach their most valuable client. We'll make them bleed for it." Outside, a downpour started, as if nature itself was mourning Bringer's imminent downfall. My phone vibrated. It was Owen Grady again. "Hey, how's it going? Just wanted to check if I should send you the new version of the Bringer presentation or if you wanted to put the finishing touches on it." The audacity. As if he didn't know I'd spent 3 years convincing Bringer's leadership of the strategy's merits. As if he could just slap his logo on my work and call it innovation. I ignored his message. Instead, I sent Vincent a single word: Thursday. Thursday was their quarterly earnings report. The day Bringer would realize the full extent of their loss. A day when Ethan Sterling usually waltzed in with donuts and is mumbling about conveyor belt synergy, promising to be unremarkable. But this Thursday, all hell was about to break loose. Not yet. I still had an ace up my sleeve, because Owen Grady had a weakness that no MBA could fix. He was desperate to be liked. And I was going to give him exactly what he craved. Attention, validation, and a front-row seat to his own demise. The day started like any other, drizzly, gray, permeated with stale office air and a faint whiff of mildew from someone's forgotten tuna salad in the communal fridge. But beneath those beige lamps and passively aggressive calendar invites, a battle was brewing. Owen Grady, in his navy blazer 2 sizes too small that he proudly called bespoke, flitted around, scattering buzzwords like confetti. Accelerating the conversion funnel, he tossed into the void. Personalized automation workflows, he muttered to himself, clearly thinking it sounded like an incantation. I waited. Waited for Ethan Sterling to waltz into the conference room with his ridiculous leather notebook that he never opened but always carried, like it was a security blanket for mediocre white-collar men. She stood, radiating anticipation, waiting for Owen Grady to follow. He flashed her a winking grin before the door closed silently. She didn't move, she wasn't on the list of attendees for the quarterly review anymore. That role had been passed to Owen Grady. Cultivate leadership, Ethan Sterling's words echoed, like a venomous taunt. Sure, cultivate it like a python cultivates a hamster. But they didn't know the bomb she had prepared. Just 20 minutes before this charade, Vincent's team had sent Bringer's CFO a starter pack directly, not just a proposal, but a clear declaration of intent, a digital dossier laying all their cards on the table. There was a detailed roadmap of their campaign, a precise sequence for launching the fall product line, and, most importantly, a plan to protect the brand from the imminent PR catastrophes that Ethan Sterling brings. And the icing on the cake was a compilation of Owen Grady's most brilliant Slack messages. Gems like, "Not sure Harper understands the new client mindset," or, "Her tone can be a little abrasive at times." And the apotheosis, "We just need to copy the Tesla newsletter and tweak the logo." And finally, the coup de grace, LOL, I told Bringer that I developed the strategy for the second quarter. Hope Harper doesn't mind. She smirked, imagining the drama unfolding. Vincent hesitated whether to include them. I answered in the affirmative. Not out of revenge, no. Just the truth, it's a surgical scalpel. Sometimes a clean, precise incision is necessary. By noon, Ethan Sterling still hadn't left the conference room. Owen Grady neither. At 12:17 p.m., my phone vibrated. Unknown number. One short message, "Bravo, Vincent." At 12:34 p.m., Owen Grady emerged from the conference room as if he'd just been whispered his own obituary. Jacket rumpled. Jaw clenched with tension. He didn't grant me a glance, nor a word. Just returned to his desk, collapsed into his chair, and stared at the monitor as if it had betrayed him. At 12:39 p.m., Ethan Sterling summoned me. Didn't even try to maintain a composed expression. Eyes bloodshot, knuckles white as he gripped the armrest. The leather notebook, for the first time ever, lay open before him, as if it could offer some use. "What have you done?" he hissed. I sat down. Calmly crossed my legs, as composed as a lake of fire. "What you taught me," I replied. "To anticipate the market. To outrun it." "You sabotaged us," he roared. "No," I countered, leaning forward. "You set me up." "Did you hope I wouldn't notice?" he spat through gritted teeth, like a dragon holding back flames to avoid incinerating everything around. "They're withdrawing the contract," he blurted out. "We've lost 7 years of profit, down the drain." "No, Ethan Sterling," I whispered, feeling everything inside me rejoice. "You lost it." I just reoriented. He glared at me, piercing through me. I endured the torment. Then, slowly, I stood up, straightened my jacket, and headed for the door. Pausing at the threshold, I threw in a final remark. "Oh, and Owen Grady. Maybe you should set him free? Before he starts teaching your successor how things really work." And I left him there, frozen, with an open notebook and a silent scream in his eyes. Exactly as he was when I first came here. Friday morning arrived with a stifling silence, as if after a controlled explosion. Calm on the outside, dust on the inside, and the foundation treacherously cracking. No one would notice if they didn't know where to look. Owen Grady was gone. His desk still sported that dreadful cactus, which I once complimented out of politeness. The monitor displayed a passive-aggressive note, written in his hand, "Don't forget the Q4 executive lunch." A pathetic reminder from the version of himself who still believed he mattered here. But his chair was empty. Ethan Sterling, like a ghost, lurked in his glass-walled aquarium office. Blinds drawn for the first time in years, a telling sign of his state. After the Bringer debacle, he hadn't uttered a word on Slack. Not a single encouraging gif, those signature tokens of support, usually featuring a silly dancing cat and the emotional depth of a wet napkin. And I rejoiced, quietly, calculatingly. Thursday was just bait. The real blow was scheduled for Monday. While Ethan Sterling desperately tried to cover up the fallout from the Bringer catastrophe, I was already deep into the second phase, conversion. Vincent's team prepared a statement, cleverly framing the situation as Bringer not breaking away, but choosing to expand with us. Mutually agreed growth strategy, new opportunities for collaboration, words flowed like honey, concealing the bitter truth. Not a word about Owen Grady, not a hint about Ethan Sterling. Only me, haloed as a strategic consultant and co-leader, basking in the glory. The cherry on top. We were to present our partnership at the TechFront Cleveland conference, the very one where Ethan Sterling, a year ago, tried to bribe the organizers to get a speaking slot and was shamefully ejected for calling the event LinkedIn Cosplay for Nerds. This year, we had the keynote, but that wasn't even the best part. That evening, Owen Grady messaged me. His message lit up on my phone screen just as I was pouring myself a whiskey. "Did you know all along? Why didn't you say anything?" I stared at the words for a few minutes, and a smile bloomed on my face. Owen Grady had just learned the cost of playing dirty. Waiting exactly 45 minutes, I replied, "You were supposed to learn, not survive. But you wanted the throne, not the lesson." There was no response. But the next morning, I received an email. Not from Owen Grady, but from HR. Subject, voluntary resignation of Joshua Kane. And below it, a short note from Ethan Sterling: "If you ever decide to come back, the doors are open." For a second, my fingers froze above the keyboard. I felt the weight of what was once my dream. But only for a second. Then I typed, "I'm not looking back, Ethan Sterling. But thank you for teaching me a valuable lesson, what kind of monster I will never become." With those words, I hit send, drained the rest of my drink, and slammed my laptop shut. On Monday, the world would shake. Not just learn about the triumphant return of Harper Stone, but understand that she never really went away. Just regrouped to change the rules of the game. I walked into TechFront Cleveland wearing a severe black suit I hadn't worn since my father's funeral, and new, murderously elegant heels. Break them in? Please. Pain, like power, looks more effective when you pretend it doesn't exist. The ballroom reeked of outsized ambition. Too much cheap cologne. Nervous sips of champagne, frantically masking insecurity. Company booths lined the walls like corporate war bunkers. Startups recklessly tossed around words like disruptive synergy. Industry patriarchs clung to their fading relevance, flaunting recycled buzzwords and QR codes leading nowhere. And right in the center of this snake pit, under a giant 10-foot LED screen, stood me. No prep rooms, no complimentary lemon water, no powder to hide the resolve burning in my eyes. I stood frozen backstage, watching the crowd arrive. A sea of faces, former colleagues, old clients, competitors. Some of them had ignored my emails for years, others had once advised me to smile more in meetings. And somewhere there, in this mass of suits and badges, was Ethan Sterling. I recognized him immediately. The same arrogant jawline, though time had taken its toll. But there was no Owen Grady by his side. No entourage of vice presidents. Just Ethan Sterling, alone, holding a conference badge, stripped of his former weight. I caught his eye. And at that moment, the lights went out. My name flashed on the screen: Harper Stone, Chief Strategy Officer, Vieira Group. Not a marketing consultant. Not an outdated consultant. Chief Strategy Officer. Vincent nodded at me from the front row. His grin was subtle, but full of energy. I stepped up to the microphone. No slides, no intro reel. Just me and a room full of people who once thought I was too abrasive to be likable, or not relaxed enough to work with clients. My name is Harper Stone. I was told I was washed up, that my job was to train my replacement, to nurture an intern to take my place. I complied. And then I brought that intern with me, to the team that just snatched the juiciest piece, the biggest account my former company could only dream of. A murmur swept through the room, real, alive, not that fake politeness masking boredom. It was amazement, laced with adrenaline. People glanced at each other, exchanged quiet remarks, phones flashed like fireflies. One guy even muttered, "Wait. Bringer?" I stretched my lips into a slow, calculated smile. "This isn't a story about revenge," I said, lowering my voice. "It's a story about design, about the systems we inherit, and the ones we rebuild when no one believes in our ability to do it. It's about looking the person handing you a knife in the eye, and teaching them exactly how you're going to use it." At first, the applause was timid, barely audible. Then it rolled in like a wave, slow, reluctant, but gaining strength. I noticed Ethan Sterling rise from his seat before the lights even came back on in the room. He didn't even try to pretend he was applauding. His face was as impenetrable as a wall. I slipped out of the ballroom, trying not to leave too noticeable a trail of blood behind me. After my speech, my inbox exploded like a New Year's Eve sparkler. Clients, recruiters, industry podcasts all clamoring for interviews. The Vieira booth was instantly mobbed. I took it all in with an impassive expression, like someone who no longer has anything to prove, only achievements to display. And then, like a bolt from the blue, I heard a familiar voice, cutting through the noise. Turning around, I saw him, Owen Grady. No badge, no corporate uniform, just jeans and that guilty look that appears on the faces of people who realize the path they've chosen leads straight into the abyss. I didn't know they were doing this, he mumbled, barely audible. You didn't bother to find out, I retorted, not deigning to raise my voice. I just wanted a chance. You got it, I snapped, you just didn't know it came with a mirror. He swallowed, looking down. Are you hiring? He choked out. I leaned in so close that he could feel the chasm between who we once were and who we have become. No, I whispered, but I'm watching. Then I turned and walked away, the click of my heels echoing in the hallway, like counting down the seconds to an explosion. Because the game isn't over yet. Not by a long shot. That night, I didn't return to my empty house. Instead, I booked a corner suite at the Renaissance Hotel, so high up that the city lights looked like scattered microchips, as if I'd cracked the code of the universe and rewritten it. The curtains stayed wide open. I craved to see the empire they'd forced me to set ablaze, to prove that I was the one who built it. Room service delivered a bottle of Malbec and a juicy steak, the same Ethan Sterling used to order for every damn celebratory dinner I never received a single word of thanks for. This time, I savored it alone, with relish. Power tastes different when no one's there to interrupt the savoring. When the bottom of the glass was just in sight, the phone rang. A familiar number flashed on the screen. I let it vibrate 4 long times before bringing the receiver to my ear. Harper, I said, evenly and without emotion. On the other end, a voice rasped like gravel, a pathetic imitation of its former confidence. Ethan Sterling, you've proven your point, he croaked. No, Ethan Sterling, I've made mine, I snapped. A heavy pause filled the line. And you call this blinding? I barely suppressed a laugh, bitter and angry. You mean how you set me up, making me train that upstart Owen Grady to take my place while you were busy, like a rat, redrawing the budget behind my back? And promised him my chair before I even had a chance to say goodbye to the onboarding deck? Silence descended, thick and oppressive. You thought I was blind? My voice vibrated with fury. You thought I didn't notice the duplicate meeting invites? The Slack threads I was accidentally removed from? You turned me into a ghost before I even left the building. Ethan Sterling tried again. His voice was softer, more ingratiating. We could fix this. There's still a place at the table. There's a new table, Ethan Sterling, I cut him off. And you're not invited. He hung up. Just like he'd hung up on our partnership. By morning, every business publication was buzzing with the news of my move to Bringer. Clean, concise, professional. Vieira's PR department had outdone themselves, portraying me as a brilliant architect of a transformational partnership play. They even called me a legacy disruptor, which felt like a dig, considering how close I'd come to being erased from that very legacy. Then the real madness began. My LinkedIn exploded with recruiter offers. Former competitors, as if waking from a trance, flooded my inbox, coffee soon. Even old colleagues who used to shy away from my nitpicking of their half-baked funnel calculations were now practically begging me to join my new team. But the most unbelievable message came from Melissa Tran, Bringer's unyielding head of strategy. The same Melissa Tran whose slow responses to Ethan Sterling's genius presentations I'd so often complained about. Your keynote made our jobs easier, but honestly, we were almost ready to give up. Owen Grady's emails were making us all twitch. Yours gave us faith again. Glad you're where you're supposed to be. I stared at the screen for a long time. Trust. The word felt different now. Like a muscle torn to shreds and healed, tougher, scarred, but now, unbreakable. A car was waiting for me downstairs. Black SUV, heated seats, a driver who knew silence was golden unless spoken to. I was driven to the Vieira campus. To a team that didn't whisper behind my back, calling me too intense, as if it were a flaw. To engineers who hung on my every word, taking notes. To analysts who knew I wasn't reading tea leaves, but calculating every step. On the way, I opened the folder Vincent had handed me after the presentation. Inside was a contract, co-director position, a percentage of profits, voting rights, stock options. And at the bottom, in his hurried, cocky handwriting, because building something without you is a pointless waste of time. This isn't just a comeback. It's a triumphant resurrection from the ashes. The first board meeting at Vieira didn't feel like a start, but a long-awaited homecoming. The kind of feeling where your bones just straightened out, as if your spine finally remembered it wasn't meant to be bent. Vincent, clearly in his element, started with the numbers, charts, margins, forecasts. As he spoke, I studied the room. 8 men, 2 women. All dressed in expensive wool suits, their faces a mixture of hesitation and curiosity. They hadn't yet decided whether to fear me or worship my arrival. Excellent. Let them squirm in that limbo. When my turn came, I stood without looking at my notes. I know what some of you are thinking, I began, letting my gaze sweep across those present. Just a month ago, I was mentoring an intern who was hired to oust me. And now I'm sharing this table with you. Some smiled thinly, while others visibly tensed. Travis from finance glanced at his watch, as if his discomfort was strictly time-regulated. I'm not here to gloat about defeating my former boss, I began, lowering my voice. I'm here to tell you what happens when you underestimate someone who's building their own destiny. Silence fell. Then Vincent leaned forward, steepling his fingers and giving me a significant look. Tell them about Phase 3. Phase 3 wasn't just growth, it was a bold move disguised as natural evolution. Not only did Bringer join us, but it brought 2 related branches with it. Contracts that Ethan Sterling didn't even suspect they were about to lose. He was too busy trying to patch up the holes left by Owen Grady's downfall. Meanwhile, like quiet mice, we gnawed away at half of his pipeline from the inside. Now, Vieira would swallow it all without choking. The transition has already begun, I continued, feeling confidence strengthen in my voice. Client-side adaptation starts next week. The structure is ready. They chose us not just for a beautiful vision. We offered them stability, I emphasized the last word, scanning the faces of my colleagues. And then I saw it. Behind the polished walnut table, Travis's mask cracked, revealing a grimace of undisguised anger. He raised his hand. Harper, you talk so much about loyalty. But doesn't all this seem like revenge? There it was. The last desperate attempt of people who mistake ambition for malice, especially when that ambition belongs to a woman who's no longer going to apologize for it. I smiled. Coldly. Calculatingly. Loyalty, I said, isn't one-sided. It's a two-way street. And when traffic stops on one side, planning begins on the other. Vincent chuckled softly, and in that instant, the air in the room seemed to crackle with electricity. Travis lowered his gaze. The vote was unanimous. New structure, new powers, all executive authority, now on my desk. After the meeting, I didn't linger. Calls with the transition teams and a late lunch awaited me. But at the elevator, Vincent stopped me. You know, Ethan Sterling called me, right? I raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. He wants a partnership. He offered to sell his firm, Vincent said, shaking his head like a disappointed father. He dared to ask for a seat on the board, Vincent spat, contempt lacing his voice. Claimed you'd create a conflict of interest. And what did you tell him? I asked, feeling rage simmer inside. Vincent smirked, like a cat that had caught a mouse. I said, we've already squeezed everything of value out of his company. I slowly exhaled, trying to control my trembling. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside. But before they closed, Vincent threw over his shoulder, "Are you sure you finished him?" I turned just enough to bare my teeth. My eyes probably flashed lightning. "I don't do charity," I hissed. "I'm not done yet." Not yet. The final chord wasn't his collapse. No, the sweetest part was yet to come. It happened on Tuesday. No pomp, no drama. No sensational headlines, no fireworks. Just a modest press release, lost on the 6th page of a pointless blog that only those already bleeding read. Ardent Strategies ceases operations due to ongoing client attrition and internal restructuring. Ardent. It was Ethan Sterling's brainchild, his personal kingdom. A name he seared onto every document, every coffee mug, every presentation, as if it were sacred scripture. Now it was fading into obscurity, quietly and pathetically. Whispers circulated about strategic miscalculations, the departure of valuable personnel, and a sudden shift in power. Not a sound about Owen Grady. Not a word about me. But deep down, I felt it. The moment Ethan Sterling tried to make that ill-fated pivot, he realized that all that was left behind was ashes, and above him were gaping holes in his parachutes. Every client he rashly transferred to Owen Grady vanished into thin air. Every employee worth fighting for had already defected to competitors or, even sweeter, sent me their resume. The irony, I didn't even have to lift a finger. I just watched. I saw Ethan Sterling, with a strained smile, conduct webinars that barely attracted any listeners. I saw his confident LinkedIn posts, full of leadership ambitions, replaced by desperate cries for job opportunities. I saw him, with a vacant stare, reposting banal quotes about hustle and offering free consultations, like a lonely traveler howling in a desolate desert. That evening, I allowed myself a little luxury. I poured sparkling champagne into a glass instead of my usual whiskey. Not to gloat over his downfall, no. I raised this glass to my silence. Because true power doesn't need fanfare. It simply disappears, leaving behind a silence that speaks louder than any words. I stepped onto the balcony of my new apartment with the glass in hand. I inhaled the fresh night air, feeling the slight tingle of bubbles on my tongue. And I smiled. Not triumphantly, but calmly and confidently. 2 floors above his former penthouse stood my new home. The windows here are like huge eyes, gazing down at the sprawling city below. The view from here was incomparably better. I stood there, feeling the living, mechanical, insatiable beast that is the metropolis pulsating beneath my feet. The night gently wrapped around my shoulders, as if donning me an armor of invisible strength. I needed neither closure to this chapter nor pathetic apologies. Revenge is always loud, it's an agony that gushes forth, it's self-satisfied boasting. But what I felt now was victory. Silent, inevitable, final. And somewhere down there, I knew, Ethan Sterling was still desperately trying to rewind the tape, looking for a loophole to get back in the game. He still can't comprehend how the intern he once took under his wing could surpass her teacher. On his face, I'm sure, was an expression of amazement and bitter disappointment.